Nifty, thanks for joining us. What does it mean to you to have your 2002 Paralympic sled hockey team inducted into the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame?
Uh, I say it's the icing on the cake. We were inducted into the Olympic and Paralympic Hall of Fame in Colorado Springs 2 years ago. And we thought that was great. And we were saying that wouldn't it be super if we could get into the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame? Never really thinking that we would. But, after all these years, over 20 years, it was kind of a surprise that we're getting all this recognition right now. But as my assistant coach Tommy Moulton said, we were the spark that lit the fire for sled hockey, really, in the United States. Once we won the medal, because we had heard that the program may be cut if we didn't win the medal. We heard that afterwards, not before. And since then, they've won a bronze and 4 golds in a row, and they're the winningest team in the world.
Nifty, remind us and walk us through the timeline on how this all came to be, that you became the coach of this fabled hockey team.
Well, the great thing is nobody knows this story. And we've been working for 8 years to possibly do a scripted movie. We've had several scripts, but we're about a couple days away from signing up with a company to do a documentary on it. And it's a great story, but I'll give you the short form. It happened with a phone call. A friend of mine back in 2001 called me, early 2001, Paul Edwards. He was on the U.S. disabled ski team. And unbeknownst to me, he was also a sled hockey player. But I didn't know that because I didn't know what sled hockey was. And he called me and he just said, "Hey, I heard that the U.S. national sled hockey team is looking for a coach because their coach quit after the World Championships last year, and they're going to be the host team in Salt Lake City in 2002 in the Paralympics. Would you be interested?" And my head started spinning. I went, "Wow, that might be great." But then in the next breath, he says, "You do know what sled hockey is, right?" And I figured if I said no, he'd say, "I'll never mind." So I said, yeah, I know what it is. I had never seen it. I didn't really have a clue. All I heard was Paralympics and hockey. And I thought it would be a challenge. It would be a lot of fun. So it took it to the next level. And when I talked to the manager, I told him I was interested, and he had the same questions. But then he went on to tell me that the team had never won a game. They were in Nagano. They won like an exhibition game, but not a game in the tournament. And then the World Championships, they didn't win a game. So now they were going to go into Salt Lake City and without a clue on what would happen. And they just didn't want to embarrass themselves. And, I looked at it as a challenge, not, no dreams of gold medals were in our heads. Let's put it that way.
And reading up on it, Nifty, the only reason the team qualified was because the U.S. was the host city in 2002. Exactly. So you come in and, reading the write-up, on the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame website about you coming in and changing the style of play and the culture. Where did you begin and what did that entail?
Well, first, they didn't have a style of play. What Tommy and I noticed, my assistant coach Tom Moulton and myself noticed early on, because we started watching some tapes from Nagano and from the World Championships, and all these guys did was chase the puck around the ice like a bunch of peewees because the other team always had it. So first, and then we noticed that the defense stayed in way too long, and the other teams would get breakaway after breakaway, and they couldn't win a game. They just weren't playing right. So we decided that we needed more speed and to put some of our best players back on defense, and B, we needed a system, a simple system, because some of these guys never grew up playing hockey. They either learned it in the rehab where they went to for an accident, or they just grew up watching hockey and found it in the rehab where they might have gone for, who knows, months and months as one of the sports, because they introduced wheelchair basketball and a lot of other sports. And a bunch of them took it. One of the guys that made the team had never played hockey growing up. had been in a terrible accident, lost both legs, and 3 years later he made the national team because he was a kamikaze. It was a lot of different levels of ability, but we did have 2 world-class players. I made maybe 3 or 4 world-class players on the team, and that way we were able to compete. But honestly, after what happened was we selected the team in August '01. We were supposed to play in a tournament with Canada and Japan up in Montreal on September 13th, and 9/11 happened. And we, again, they shut the airspace down, never went up there. And we never played another team for 6 months before we went into Salt Lake City. So all we did was practice amongst ourselves, but it gave us, Tom and I, time to instill a system that simple enough that everybody on the team could understand and hopefully use in a game. But we didn't know until we got into Salt Lake City.
Nifty, from your playing days, as you well know, there's, and especially as the job has evolved, coaching, there is just so many layers to coaching. I'm curious what that learning curve was like for you. Really a novice coach, I'm assuming.
Oh, I was a novice.
And new to the sport, their particular sport, what that learning curve was, and then having to get to know the players, their personalities, and then to get them not only systems-wise, but to have them be the best versions of themselves so you could reach this ultimate goal.
Well, you wouldn't even believe it, Rick. I mean, I called it the bizarro world of sled hockey. I did not know the beehive I was getting into, because as soon as I was even asked to coach, there was another coach from Chicago that thought he should be king. And who's this guy? Even though he played in the NHL, bringing him in from the outside, and he caused a lot of flack and problems with the team all the way into Salt Lake City. And it's a longer story, and we don't have time here. But as it turned out, almost half of the guys that we ended up selecting, and to his own credit, he ran the Rehab Institute of Chicago, and he got these guys a lot of ice time. They took them to a lot of tournaments, and they developed their skills on the ice. But he didn't skate. He used to coach them from the bench. And almost half of the guys on the national team we ended up picking from Chicago, and some of them, about 3 of them, were really allegiant to him. So not only did Tom and I have to teach them a system where some of them were having a difficult time, offensive zone, neutral zone, defensive zone, where do you go on the face-off, all this stuff. We had these other guys off the ice allegiant to him, and at one time trying to cause a mutiny to get me kicked off as coach. That's the story.
I didn't expect that layer to the story.
yeah. That's why it's going to make a great documentary.
Yeah. Well, hey, by the way, do you and Tommy have your Screen Actors Guild card? Because when the movie comes out, you're going to have to play yourselves,
Well, we've been trying for 8 years to get a script written and a movie done, but we decided, because it's a lot quicker and a lot cheaper to do a documentary. And that way the story will be out there, and then hopefully people will be interested in maybe doing a movie down the road. But no, we just wanted this story to come out and be told. And it's a perfect time with the Hall of Fame coming up.
And so, Nifty, obviously, you come home with the gold, but leading up to the gold medal game, and whether it's the round robin or any other game that sort of stand out to you where it was sort of like the aha moment that you might actually have something special here?
Well, yes and no. I mean, when we went into Salt Lake City, we still had a little disruption on the team, like I told you about. But once we got in, we made sure that everybody was going to play, like they said in the 1980 team, for the name on the front, not the back. And so everybody bought into USA. All the team problems were, I was told, put aside. And our first game was against Japan. Now, as we were saying, they had never won a game, so I was worried that I wasn't even concerned about Canada #1 seed, Norway #2 seed. I figured if we were going to get in the bronze medal game, maybe, I mean, that would be the first goal. we'd have to beat Japan, Estonia, and probably Sweden. And the first game was Japan, and it was at 9 o'clock in the morning, and you could count how many people were in the stands. So we didn't have a big cheering section for us. And the game was 0-0 going in the third period. I turned to Tommy, and I said, if we don't win this one, we might as well just go home. And turned out we scored 3 in the third. We won 3-0, and that gave us some confidence. We had a couple exhibition games before that, but you can't put anything on them that we did well in. But the first game of the tournament, and they never beat Japan before. So this was a big win for us. But we're playing the next night against Canada, and it's been sold out for weeks. 6,000 people in the E-Center. We went from 60 maybe in the stands on Friday to 6,000. Biggest crowd these guys ever played in front of against the number 1 seed. So you can imagine how nervous we were. And as it turned out, we ended up spanking them 5-1. They never recovered. They didn't win another game. And Sylvester Fliss, nicknamed Sled, probably the best player, one of the world-class players, but had never really been seen at that level. He was one of the guys, I could recognize it in training camp. We put him back on defense. He wore number 4, ironically, and he scored a hat trick in the Canada game. And that was his coming out party, because he ended up scoring 11 goals in 5 games with 3 hat tricks. And he ended up as the MVP of the whole tournament. But we didn't know that was going to happen. And when we beat Canada for the first time, like Brick, these tournaments. I played in 2 Canada Cup tournaments. You get some momentum. You're only playing for a week. It's not an 80-game season. You get some momentum. We started believing in ourselves for the first time. And now our next game was Norway, and we looked at each other saying, hey, if we beat Norway, we're in the gold medal game. We never dreamed we'd ever be there. It's just the way the schedule was set up. And but that Canada game was the game that for the first time in 8 months that we really believed we might be able to win something.
It's just such a phenomenal story. You win gold. I'm curious as we wind down this interview. We could talk all day, Nift. You know that.
Oh yeah.
I'm curious what your relationship is with the program today, and do you feel like you started a dynasty? They've won gold in 2010, 14, 18, 22.
I would like to say so, but they fired us. They fired us. I don't know whether they just didn't rehire us. Let's put it that way. And there was so much politics being played at that time, because USA Hockey wasn't involved yet. They were helping out with the jerseys and maybe a few bucks, but they had not taken sled hockey on as a national governing body yet. They didn't do that till 2006. So for whatever reason, they didn't want us back. And that's fine. I always said you can only win the first one once. And they had turned the gold into a bronze in Torino in 2006. But since then, USA Hockey took it over, I believe, right after the 2006 Paralympics, and they've won 4 golds since then. They not a lot of teams can even challenge them. Canada can, but the best player in the world, his name is Declan Farmer, and he is something else. You got to see him.
Well, 2002 started it all, Nifty, and that's why that team is going into the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame. Congratulations. Induction ceremony on December 4th in Pittsburgh. We really appreciate your time. We look forward to seeing you around the Garden soon.
Well, I'll be there tomorrow night for sure. and thank you for having me on to talk about this. Like I said, I could talk about this all day, because there's so many storylines, and it was such a great story. I'm just hoping this documentary comes out before the next Paralympics. It's going to be great.
Well,